see the blood. I will pass over you. Oh, what compassion, oh, boundless love. Jesus hath power, Jesus is true. All who believe are safe from the storm. Oh, he will pass over you. When I see the blood, when I see the blood, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Amen. Jack, why don't you open us up? Word of prayer, please. Amen. Go ahead and have a seat. All right. Turn to 2 Samuel chapter 16. No, I haven't. I'm going to find out where I'm starting here. 2 Samuel chapter 16. Okay. And we're going to read the first 13 verses. Because there's a lot of people here today that haven't been here, so this will get them up a little bit up to speed and have an idea where we're at. And when David was a little past the top of the hill, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of asses saddled, and upon them 200 loaves of bread, and 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 summer fruits, and a bottle of wine. And the king said unto Ziba, What meanest thou by these? And Ziba said, These asses be for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine that such as be faint in the wilderness may drink. And the king said, And where is thy master's son? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he abideth in Jerusalem, for he said, Today shalt the house of Israel restore to me the kingdom of my fathers, referring to Mephibosheth. And verse 4, Then said the king to Ziba, Behold, thine are all that pertaineth unto Mephibosheth. And Ziba said, I humbly beseech thee that I may find grace in thy sight, my lord, O king. And when King David came to Bahurim, behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came forth and cursed still as he came. And he cast stones at David and all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and his left. And thus said Shimei when he cursed, Come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. Then said Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, unto the king, Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. The king said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord hath said unto him, Curse David. Who shall then say, Wherefore hast thou done so? And David said to Abishai and all his servants, Behold, my son, which came forth out of my bowels, seeketh my life. How much more now may this Benjamite do it? Let him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. And it may be that the Lord will look upon mine affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. And as David and his men went by the way, Shimei went along on the hill's side over against him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him and cast dust. With that, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your love and your goodness to us. Thank you for your many blessings and for another opportunity and privilege to be in your house and to learn the Word of God. I pray that you'll bless now the other classes that are going on, that you'd be with those that are teaching, that you'd give them the words that you would have them to speak and to teach, and that those hearing would be receptive to it. I pray that in here you'll set me aside and fill me with your Spirit. Give me the words you'd have me to speak, and that it comes forth as you would want, and that everything that we do here, Father, would be pleasing to you. And we'll give you all the praise in Jesus' name. Amen. So just a brief recap on this for those that haven't been here. Absalom has won the hearts of Israel, of many of the people of Israel. Absalom being David's son, and he has turned against David. He's trying to overthrow the kingdom, take the kingdom from David. David gets wind of it and decides to pack things up, to just get out of Jerusalem. It's not that he's afraid, and we covered this a few weeks ago. It isn't that he's afraid, but he doesn't want Jerusalem destroyed. He doesn't want to get involved into a civil war with his own son, and that there would be Israelites fighting Israelites and much bloodshed. He's trying to avoid that, so he just leaves the city with at least 600 of his men, the 600 that were with him when he was on the run from Saul years ago, and then there's others, family members and such, that are with him. And so they get out of town so that when Absalom comes into Jerusalem, he can come into Jerusalem peaceably, and that there's no bloodshed, and there's no fight, and there's no destruction, because David even indicated that there would be destruction of the city. That's what happens when there's somebody takes over a city. They destroy things, they burn things, they kill a lot of people. And so he's tried to avoid that. And so now he's on a ridgeway, on one side of a ridge, and there's a crevasse or a ravine or something, and then there's another ridgeway on the other side, and this guy named Shimei is over there cursing him and yelling things and throwing rocks and I know we don't know how big this thing is. We don't even know if the rocks are making it there, but he's got a lot of intent, and he's cursing David as he goes, and David says, let him curse. David's got enough on his plate with his own son trying to kill him, and what could be worse than that? I can handle some guy cursing me and throwing rocks at me. My son's trying to kill me. This is a little bit less than that. So he says, let him curse, no big deal. Plus, he knows in his mind that he sinned with Bathsheba, and that Nathan the prophet came and gave him a laundry list of consequences that were going to take place, and he's just accepting this as part of his payback, his consequences for sinning with Bathsheba. Absalom coming after the throne, and the unrest within his own family has been taking place with Amnon and Tamar, and Absalom killing Amnon, and all this stuff. That was predicted. That was prophesied by Nathan the prophet. And so this is all part of it. And so David's on the run. David said, let him curse. And he knows that David allows Shimei to curse because he knows that God's judgment is just, both towards himself and to the offending party, which would be Shimei. David wrote this in Psalm 37:28. For the Lord loveth judgment, and forsaketh not his saints. They are preserved forever, but the seed of the wicked shall be cut off. He also wrote this in Psalm 9, verses 7 and 8. But the Lord shall endure forever. He hath prepared his throne for judgment, and he shall judge the world in righteousness. He shall minister judgment to the people in uprightness. The Lord will judge always in a righteous manner. You know, how many of us have heard somebody say, or maybe we've said it ourselves, well, if I could do, I would do such and such. I would take this action against this person, or I would do this on the. No, we don't think like God. We don't have the mind of God. God's righteous. We're not. We want to get revenge on somebody, but God says, Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. We're not supposed to take vengeance. We're supposed to put it in God's hands. And David's doing that. David knows that God is righteous, God is just, and if he gives it to God, God will do what's right. And Shimei will get what's coming to him, and David's going to get what's coming to him, and he's dealing with it right now. And that's why we aren't in charge. God's in charge. And because he's righteous and he's just, and we're not. We just want to we're in the flesh, and we want to get vengeance on somebody because they wronged us. Verse 4, 2 Samuel 16, verse 14. And the king and all the people that were with him came weary and refreshed themselves there. They refreshed themselves. They were on their way to a place called Borden. They're at Borden. They refreshed themselves there. And Absalom, verse 15, and all the people of the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. So finally, now David leaves, and his men, and his family, they leave to avoid conflict with Absalom. So they're out on this ridge, and they finally get to this town called Borden, and Absalom finally makes it to the city of Jerusalem. And it happens pretty much simultaneously. Ahithophel was David's counselor, had been his counselor for many years. And he is now on the side of Absalom. He's gone out with him, he sided with him, and now he is Absalom's counselor. And so he's David's former counselor. And because Absalom had won over a great number of Israelites, and David and his loyal followers left, Absalom was able to enter the city, and he met no resistance, and there was no incident. There was no bloodshed. They didn't have to break down the gate to get in the city. There was no violence of any kind. They were able to just come right in. And that's what David wanted. That's the way he wanted it to be. So there was no bloodshed, no destruction. And had David stayed in the city, there would have been more than likely a very bloody battle. Remember, I mentioned a few minutes ago that David left with the 600 men that were with him when he was being chased by Saul many years ago. And those 600 men were valiant warriors who could fight a battle. And they fought many battles, and they fought many battles with Philistines and different people, Amalekites and such, and they always won. God was on their side, and they were always outnumbered. And if they were outnumbered here, there's no doubt in my mind that God would be on David's side and his men, because David is the one that God chose to be the king, not Absalom. However, there would still be bloodshed. Billy. Why did Saul chase David? Well, that happened years before. Saul was the king, and he was jealous of David because David was getting all kinds of accolades from the people. And so he wanted to kill him because he was jealous of him. And it never happened, and Saul ended up dying in battle. But that's why Saul was chasing him years earlier. Verse 16. And it came to pass when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, was come unto Absalom, that Hushai said unto Absalom, God save the king, God save the king. Now, if you haven't been here, or you're not up to speed on this, Hushai, and it says is David's friend, Hushai and Ahithophel were both David's counselors. Hushai is still David's counselor, and David has sent 2 priests and Hushai back to the city to be the eyes and ears on the inside. The 2 priests, Abiathar, and the other name is, I'm drawing a blank, but Abiathar and his son, and the other priest and his son, there's 4 of them actually. 2 are on the outside in another town waiting for word. And it's like, you find out what's going on, you tell the 2 sons come to David, and it's a messenger system. And so Abiathar and the other priest are in the town doing the work of a priest, doing the priestly things, but they're keeping their eyes open, and they're listening. What David wants to know is, who's on my side, who's on Absalom's side? And when is it safe for me to come back? Hushai, being the counselor, is on the inside in the palace with Absalom. And so he sends him back, and he says, I want you to go back and be the eyes and ears for me on the inside. You find out whatever intelligence you can, get it to the priests, they'll get it to their sons, and they'll bring it to me, and then I'll know what's going on. So Hushai has been sent back to become Absalom's counselor. And so as he's there, he says to Absalom, God save the king, God save the king. No, they're doing it in a way that's very secretive so that nobody gets caught. That's why they have so many different... Actually, the people on the inside are giving the word to a woman, a maiden, who's then carrying the message to the sons that are outside. And then, so it's very secretive so that nobody gets caught. Okay? So David sent Hushai back to portray himself as counselor to Absalom, as David's eyes and ears on the inside. And Absalom comes into the city and sees Hushai, and one can only imagine his surprise. He knows that Hushai is David's closest friend, not only his counselor, but his closest friend. And perhaps when he entered, he muttered the words to somebody who was with him, what's he doing here? Not expecting him to be there, expecting him to be by David's side. He knew that Hushai was David's closest friend, never expected to see him, had to be surprised, but yet Hushai greets him with such a greeting. God save the king, he says, and he says it twice. Greetings, that's a greeting of loyalty. And by saying, God save the king, he's wishing him a long and prosperous life. And then he says it twice to emphasize that he means it. And Absalom must be feeling really fortunate because he knows that Ahithophel was David's counselor, and he knows that Hushai was David's counselor and closest friend, and he's got to be feeling fortunate that he's got somebody with the kind of loyalty that Hushai can give on his side. So he's got two counselors. David's counselors are now with him, Ahithophel and Hushai. And in verse 17, and Absalom said to Hushai, Is this thy kindness to thy friend? Is this how you treat your friend, by turning your back on him? Pretty much what he's saying. Why winnest thou not with thy friend? He doesn't even have the nerve to call his own father the king, or King David, or just David. He calls him thy friend. He can't address him as his own father. And his first response to the question, his first response is to question Hushai's loyalty and why he's not with David, knowing of their friendship. And that would be an automatic assumption that he might question that. And in verse 18, Hushai said unto Absalom, Nay, but whom... Now listen to how he phrases this. I like the way he phrases this. And Hushai said unto Absalom, Nay, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his will I be, and with him will I abide. Hushai implies that the Lord has ordained the situation with Absalom as king. But his statement, if you read his statement is very ambiguous. He never said, my loyalty is with you. He says, my loyalty is with whom the Lord chose. Well, the Lord chose David, and we all know that, and Hushai knows that. So his statement is actually kind of amusing because it's ambiguous, and it doesn't say, I'm with you, Absalom. He's still saying, I'm with David, but Absalom doesn't read that into it. And he says that he's with whom the Lord chooses. So that means that his loyalty is with David because the Lord chose David to be king of Israel, not Absalom. And he didn't even have to lie to say it. He said a true statement that was very specific, yet as vague as could be, and get away with it. And it was truthful in everything that he said. Now, keep in mind again why Hushai is there. He's the inside man in the palace as an advisor to the king. And if we go back a few weeks ago in our Sunday school, David prayed that, because he knew that Ahithophel had turned against him and gone out with Absalom. And he prayed that Ahithophel's counsel would be turned against him. And Hushai's counsel is going to turn, and we haven't got there yet, but is going to turn Ahithophel's counsel against him. And because Ahithophel is going to give Absalom some instruction, some advice, and then he goes to Hushai and asks his advice. And he's going to take Hushai's advice over Ahithophel's and turn it against him. We aren't going to get there this week. It's probably going to be next week. But that's what's going to happen. So that's his job, is to be the counsel to the king, Absalom, and turn the counsel of Ahithophel against him, because that was what he prayed. And Absalom never questions his comments. He falls for what he said there in verse 18, hook, line, and sinker. It's as vague and ambiguous as can be, but Absalom accepts it, and that's that. Verse 19, and again, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have, again, this is another ambiguous statement. Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in thy father's presence, so will I be in thy presence. Ambiguous. He never says that he is serving Absalom. He says that he's serving in Absalom's presence. But he's actually serving David in Absalom's presence. And he is serving David still. And again, an ambiguous statement, and Absalom just says, okay, he accepts it. And he's also declaring in verse 19 that he is going to be his counselor, one of his two counselors. If there will be one, he's saying, I will be your counselor, and as I was for David. And his response is just in time, because Absalom is already, he hasn't been there, a short time, maybe an hour, 2 hours, whatever. He just got to the town, and he already wants some advice. He already wants some counsel. Verse 20, then said Absalom to Ahithophel, give counsel among you what we shall do. Naturally, he turns first to Ahithophel. He was the one that was by his side when they did the overthrow, and he was his original counselor and was with him from the beginning as he started winning the people of Israel over to him. And he wants to know, okay, so now that we're here, what should we do next? Now that we've entered into Jerusalem, we've taken the city without incident, what's the next step? Well, in my opinion, in my mind, from what I know of the Word of God, the next thing to do would be to go to God and say, God, what should we do? Counsel with God, not with a man. And he didn't do that. He should have gone to the priest, and using the Urim and the Thummim and the process that they did, he should have asked God, what would we do? And inquire of God of the next step. But he didn't do that. He either would have got nothing, because he wasn't a godly man, or the answer would have come back against him anyways. And so maybe he knew that, I don't know. But he goes to Ahithophel and asks him, what's next? What should we do? And since he wasn't a godly man, and he wasn't in the will of God, maybe this just never even occurred to him to go to the priest. Or the other alternative is maybe it occurred to him and he knew that if he went to the priest, he wouldn't get the answer he wanted. Those are your two options. And calling on God for wisdom should be the automatic process, or the automatic thing to do for someone who's walking with God. If we're walking with God, it should just be automatic. Okay, well, let's ask God what he wants us to do, what he wants me to do. James chapter 1 and verse 5, because he wants the wisdom of these counselors. James chapter 1 and verse 5 says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, it shall be given him. But let him ask. And we covered these verses just off the top of my head last week. I had a little stumbling block. I didn't have it in my notes, and I was drawing a blank on the phrase, and it's verse number 8. But as verse 6 says, but let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. If you're going to pray and ask God something, and you're wavering, you don't believe that God's going to answer your prayer, don't even bother, because it's not going to get answered. Nothing wavering. So you have to be, as I said last week, all in. You can't be in and out, wishy-washy, wavering. For verse 7, for let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. This was the verse I was drawing a blank on. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. We ought to ask God for the wisdom in our lives, not to another man. You know, we may be smart, we may know some things, but God knows everything, and he can give us the answers we need. Absalom should have gone to God if he wanted true wisdom, and not to a man. But Absalom is seeking out the wisdom of men. After all, they were there to give him counsel, but the ultimate counsel comes from God. Absalom doesn't care about God. He's not a godly man. He's angry at his father. He's bitter, and he only cares about himself and what's going on with him and what he's doing. He couldn't care less about anything else, and has no interest in anything that's godly. And that's the way the unsaved people are. They're just, we have to know with David. David was a godly man. David taught his kids when they were young, but we can teach our kids, and if they can go by the wayside. And apparently his kids have gone by the wayside. Amnon went by the wayside, and he did wrongly. He only cared about himself and his own pleasure. Absalom now is going by the wayside. He's not interested in anything godly. So we have to really be careful with our kids that we keep working on them, and just be consistent with them too, so that we can try to prevent our kids from going by the wayside, and our grandkids too. We need to be the example. James chapter 3, verse 13. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if you have, remember I said he's bitter and he's angry. If you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. This is what Absalom has right here. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. If we get our wisdom from God, we should not act out of anger or bitterness, because the wisdom from God is pure and it's just. And it should be easy for us to accept it, because it comes from an all-knowing and a righteous God. So when we seek wisdom, we ought to seek wisdom from the Lord, from God, not from man. Verse 20. Then said Absalom to Ahithophel, and I read this before, but I'm bringing it back so we get in context here. Then it said Absalom to Ahithophel, give counsel among you what we should do. Absalom addresses Ahithophel, his first counselor, he says, give counsel among you, because Hushai's there too, and indicates that he and Hushai should communicate and converse and come up with the plan, whatever it's going to be. And I don't think that they communicated or conversed at all. I think Ahithophel just blurted out the first thing that came into his mind to finish off David's kingdom. And this is not a wise counsel by any means that he comes up with. Verse 21, and Ahithophel, because if he'd communicated with Hushai, I think the answer might have been a little different. Verse 21, and Ahithophel said unto Absalom, go in unto thy father's concubines. Now, going back a couple of weeks, when David left Jerusalem, he left 10 of his wives, 10 concubines, to tend to the palace, to take care of things that needed to be taken care of. They weren't there to defend it. They weren't there to defend the city. They weren't there to do anything like that. They were just tending to the daily maintenance of the house. And they were there, 10 of them. So this is Ahithophel's wise counsel. And Ahithophel said unto Absalom, Go in unto thy father's concubines, which he left to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. Then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. Now, typically, the previous king is dead when the son takes over. It's usually not a coup or an overthrow. Question in the back. Yeah, that he did that. He did that. He knowing that Ahithophel had sided with Absalom, he cursed him then. This was, right when they were getting ready to leave Jerusalem. He did that. That was before. We covered that a few weeks ago, but that he did it then, and the council is this isn't the council that gets cursed. It's the next one. There's one right after this, which we won't get to today, but typically, when a son takes over the kingdom, the father has died. It's not an overthrow. Now, sometimes there's overthrows by a jealous servant or somebody who's a second in command or somebody or other, but they kill the king and then take the throne. They don't let the king live. That's a threat. If the other king is still alive,